Hey everyone, we're going to be going over STAAR short answer responses today, so have pen, paper handy in case you come up with any questions, and we're going to get started. All right, so SAR stands for short answer response. We have an acronym that is preferred format to answer these, and it's called ACE. The first A stands for answering the question. You want to do that in the first sentence. Be very, very clear. Use very clear language. Don't leave your reader guessing as to what your meaning is, because that's a surefire way to get a low score. Next, C, cite evidence. You have to back up your idea with a quote, and it needs to strongly support that answer. And then E is explanation. You have to explain how the connection between your answer and your quote. You have to make it clear that you know your answer because of the evidence that you're using. So here we have the scoring system. I'm going to make myself smaller so you can see this. All right. Here we have the scoring system that's used for SARs, right? 0, 2, 3. 0 and 1 is considered not passing, right? And if you look at the red in terms of how this is defined, right? 0, not answering the question that's asked, being super vague, just copying down the evidence. If you've been doing that and kind of like trying to hope that you can just skate by, it's not going to work. 1 is, yeah, you got an answer there, but it's super literal. I mean, come on, literature is all about hidden meaning and deep connections and metaphor and symbolism. So stating the obvious, also, that's not going to get you there. What we really want to be reaching for, what a majority of you most of you should be able to accomplish is a 2, right? Going just beyond a literal reading of the text, making an appropriate connection, and finding an evidence that is accurate and relevant. A few of you will be able to do a 3 score, which is that deep connection, that really strong, complex awareness of the text. And hey, it's fine if not all of you are 3 writers. Okay. But everyone should be able to reach a 2 because that's kind of considered the minimum. Right? All right, so let's go into some of my tips, right? These are my personal tips. 1, your whole entire question is asking you to interpret the text, so why not find your quote first? Find your good quote, then figure out the deeper meaning of it, so that way you don't write your first reaction to the quote, which is probably going to be the most literal and obvious, which is not right. It's a 1. Okay. Don't just copy down the quote either. Again, that's like a big fat 0 right there. Don't need you to be practicing copying down quotes. We're beyond that now. Make sure you're using keywords from the question in your responses so that you are actually answering the question that's being asked. And, hey, mind your limit, because right here we have your, the amount of space that you have for your answer, and it's short. You only have 10 lines. And I've noticed that some of you have been going outside the box and exceeding your limit. That's not going to work. Okay, you've been skating by right now, but when it comes to STAAR, they will not read what you write outside that box. They will not read what you double up on. If you try to squeeze something in there by kind of overlapping words, nuh-uh. You need to fit everything in 10 lines. Fair? No. But when we recognize this is a hard rule, so we have to adhere to it. So if you're exceeding the limit, you need to edit or write smaller. Okay, these are a few examples of different types of responses and the scores that they received. I know we might not be familiar with this exact question, but what we're really kind of looking at is the response, right? So here we have something that's considered insufficient, a 0. Look at the sentence. It starts with he. Who is he? Give me a name. I need to know who he is. And then he says, he always thought of the sea as Lamar, which is what people call her. Wow, I feel like I'm having deja vu because it says the exact same thing in the quote right after it. No, not going to work. That's a 0. So let's move on to something a little bit higher. Okay, so here we have a 1, partially sufficient. Okay, we're at least starting with the name, Santiago. Thank you. I have a name now. But I'm just kind of glancing at this, and I'm also seeing that there's not an actual, quote. We just have, a general reference to the text because it just says Lamar and feminine and great favors. That is not sufficient. I need an actual meaty quote that's going to help me be able to understand your response is legit. So, moving on. Okay, all right. We have a good answer. We're actually using words from the question, right? Personification explains the relationship. Da-da-da-da-da. We have a pretty good quote right there. Seems like this person did go just beyond a literal interpretation, right? I actually found a quote that cites something about the sea being like a woman, and I like the fact that it says that the sea does things that a real woman would do, and then actually interprets that relationship that Santiago has with the sea. It makes him seem closer to it. So we're not exactly copying, we're interpreting. Okay, so most of you will kind of get in this range, which is perfectly fine, right? We answered the question, we kind of went a little bit deeper than the most obvious answer, and we found a quote that was accurate and relevant. A 3 is really hard, and it's supposed to be, right? It's the highest score they can give you. In this response, right, about personification and relationship with the sea, this person finds a really good quote and interprets it, but then at the very end, right here, this is really good, right? Makes a real world connection, right? Says that Hemingway, the author, is defending the sea as if she had a life just like a man would do for a woman, right? That's awesome. I noticed some of you really trying to incorporate a real world connection into your answer, and that's fantastic, right? But notice that this is just like a part of a sentence. So it's a reference to a real world connection. It doesn't take the place of a whole explanation. So a real world connection is like the icing on top, but you still have to have your foundation of a real answer and a real quote and an explanation for that quote. You can't take out something to put in your connection. That's, you just can't do that. You have to have A, C, E. Then if you have space and you think you can do it well, plus real world connection. You should not be taking up multiple lines with your connection. Then you're taking out something from your response. Okay, so I'm going to stop for a second right here so we can take a look at something else that's done in SARs, which is the crossover. Okay, so here's some text on crossover SARs. You may be asking, what is a crossover? You've done them. Crossover SARs are just like what we just went over, right? Which is single text. We practice that a lot. But crossovers are a little trickier. I shouldn't say trickier. It's just a little bit more work. It works exactly like an ACE, except instead of just one text that you are selecting a quote from, you have two. And your job is to connect them. Find how they are similar, right? So let's go over a few steps that you can do in terms of answering your crossover SAR. All right, 7 steps here. Sounds like a lot. They're repeated. All right, so first step, just like in your ACE, hey, you got to answer that prompt. This time, I want you to include the titles of both works so I know what you are responding to. Then steps 2 and 3 is just like the ACE. You're going to find a quote from the first work that's going to support your answer, and then you have to explain how that quote connects back to your answer. This one says have a transition word or statement that leads into your next work. You can use that. I know I've given you a handout on transition words. It's linked on my website under writing. You can also Google transition words. It won't hurt you to just have a couple memorized so you can pull them out when you need to. It's going to help your flow. And vocabulary, flow, never a bad thing. Now, very importantly next, you need to have follow-up that your first ACE from the first selection with your second CE, the second selection. Another quote, right? That's the thing with SARs. You have to have quote from 1, quote from 2. So, back up your answer with evidence from the second work, comment, leave an explanation on how that evidence connects back to your answer. And then, you got to remember that this is all about interpreting this for the reader, right? So you have to conclude everything with a statement explaining how those two works relate to one another. So let's take a look at an example. All right, helpfully color-coded. Thank you very much, so I can understand what is what. And, works that we're familiar with. How are the themes of The Lion King and Finding Nemo similar? Don't don't go thinking you're going to get questions this easy in class. But we do have the titles of both works in the answer, and we have a good answer that Lion King and Finding Nemo both contain a central theme. Sometimes we feel guilty for hurting those we care about. So in the light green, we have a quote from, I guess, a book version of Lion King from Simba, where he talks about, it's my fault, it's my fault. And then the explanation, how does that quote connect back to the answer? Well, he says this because even though his father died a long time ago, he still feels guilty, knowing that his father died to rescue him. Then in the dark green, we have the follow-up, the evidence and explanation for the second work. In Finding Nemo, Marlin, he says, maybe he wouldn't have done it if I hadn't been so tough on him. Okay, so this is a good quote, also supports the idea that's explained in the next sentence. One of the reasons that Nemo's dad is so desperate to find him is because he feels guilty about the way he treated his son. Oh, okay, so that is relevant. And then in the red, we have that concluding sentence. Both Simba and Marlin, the two characters from the two pieces we're talking about, feel guilty, words from this answer, for putting their loved one in harm's way. So everything reverts back to the answer. I get it. It's interpreted for me. Simple enough. Okay? So, I'm going to conclude my video. This is way too big. Oh my. Okay, let's just put it right there. Fine. This is going to conclude my video on SARs. Please write down any questions that you may have. If it was too fast, go back, watch the whole thing over again. That's the beauty of a video. We'll have a Q&A session in class when next time I see you, and we will have a practice over crossover SARs. So be prepared, and I'll see you then. Bye.